Welcome everyone to our Green Homes webinar on the private sector and energy efficiency. I'm Luke Loveridge. I'm a founder of several tech businesses which have helped particularly social landlords and private landlords retrofit their homes and keep them more healthy. Most recent of which has just been acquired by EcoApproach a few months ago. I'm really excited actually to be joined by a really stellar panel of experts. So we've got Bobby from EcoApproach. So he is our renewable sales manager, but he also leads a lot on our minimum energy efficiency standards processes as well. We've got Neil Cobbold from Reapit, so commercial director, who's been heavily involved in the minimum energy efficiency standards. And also Chloe from the Green Mortgage Institute, who's a green mortgage expert. I'll just share my screen. So, okay, I've just introduced everyone, and if you do have any questions during the webinar, please just put them in the Q&A or the chat, and we'll try and get to them at the end of the webinar. You guys are on mute. That's completely normal. We're start with a few presentations and then get to the Q&A. So of those presentations, I'll just give a quick overview of the minimum energy efficiency challenge. Then we'll go on to Neil, who will give us an update on the latest on MEES and EPC changes. And then we'll go on to Bobby, who will give us some insights around some of the improvements which can be made to different types of properties. And then on to Chloe, who will look at how landlords actually finance those works, and then finish on the Q&A with the panel. So just to give an overview of the minimum energy efficiency standards challenge, I'm going to start with actually what's in scope. So obviously the private rented sector, that's about 2.9 million homes, which will be needed to be upgraded. But it also includes the social rented sector. So these new proposals are looking to expand the scope, not just from private rented, but also to social rented. And that will include another 1 million homes that need to be retrofitted. But I think an interesting proposal is actually to include short-term lets as well. So that's holiday lets, temporary accommodation. I'd say interesting, but this means potentially new landlords that have not been exposed to minimum energy standards before, the previous rules, or even have EPCs coming on and having to get compliant all of a sudden. So there's probably going to be a lot of a need for greater awareness amongst this specific group of landlords. And there will be a number of challenges to these proposals. So firstly, timescale. So the government doesn't seem to be budging on the 2030 compliance deadline. So for all tenancies to be compliant by the time these regulations are confirmed and then implemented, we could be getting down to maybe 3 years in which to upgrade quite a significant number of properties, potentially like 4 million properties. So that's a huge hill to climb there. And then combined with this, we've got another challenge of actually the supply chain. The people actually going out and doing the retrofits, that's actually reduced. So between 2018 and 2024, there are actually 26% fewer qualified electricians, just as demand is increasing. So there will be some bottlenecks there, I believe. And then finally, finance. So how will landlords actually pay for this compliance? So the average cost to get compliant is between £6,000 and £8,000. And then if you take that into account in terms of the average property value, we're looking at about 2.2% of the property value to get compliant. Obviously, that will vary quite widely from region. So London, that will be potentially quite lower, for example, and then also by the archetype of the property as well, from detached to flat. But that is quite a significant challenge there too. So what does it mean for you? So for lenders, there is a significant risk there around potentially devaluations, properties not being able to be let out, sort of the financial circumstances of the landlord if they get fined, for example, but also your own sort of net zero and sustainability goals as well. There's quite a significant risk there for lenders. But I would also say there is an opportunity to be shown to be actually acting to help your landlords and differentiating in terms of that customer service, and also helping to lend and facilitate those retrofit works. For brokers, I do think there's sort of quite potentially a shift in role, and potentially there could be quite complex criteria or restrictions from lenders on certain numbers of your clients. So you're going to have to be sort of familiar with that and help sort of guide your clients through that. But also as an opportunity, again, added value to your clients and potentially a growth in specialist lending, maybe bridging, and again, how you need to sort of understand further what sort of lending options there are for certain client types. And then for agents, I think one point is about being prepared for market changes. So potentially a lot of landlords might just sell up rather than be compliant if it's not quite working out for them. But on the flip side, there might be new entrants to the market as well that see it as an opportunity to retrofit, get those properties to quite a high standard and charge potentially more rent for them as well. Double-edged sword is the management of this. So you potentially could get influx with quite a significant amount of inquiries from your landlords and having to do assessments, arrange EPCs, etc. But also an opportunity to actually add additional services to those landlords and again differentiate in terms of added value to your clients. So that's quite a brief overview. I'm now going to hand over to Neil from Reapit. Neil.
Thank you very much, Luke. So Luke's asked me to give kind of a brief overview. So Dr. Neil Cobbold, Commercial Director for Reapit. Reapit, we are a large technology provider servicing the estate agent market that's actually going into those landlords. So typically the information that we see is probably a little bit higher and better than the national average, just because typically engaging with some of the larger, more corporate estate agents who are actually part of our user base, we find that they're driving these changes and trying to get people ready. However, there's been a lot of change, and a lot of that change has actually driven a little bit of inertia in the market that we've already seen starting to bring things down to a stop, where people who are even wanting to make changes are finding that within the larger groups, within their own bodies that manage the estate agencies and landlord groups, are being told to wait. And as Luke previously mentioned, we've got supply chain issues and timing delays already putting pressure on this. What we don't want is to see this impact. So if we have a quick look, where are we at the moment? What are the government actually telling us? If you go on to the first slide for me, Luke. So very, very kindly, they decided to do both of these consultations. And I know we're looking England and Wales, but Scotland is also going through the same kind of review and consultation at the moment. And while I think everybody is behind a cross-party that with our old stock, there is a need for us to look at how do we retrofit, how do we get up? I think in both there is a nervousness over timeframes and creating a supply and demand issue, which causes extra finance pressures for those landlords who are particularly going to be coming to you to look for these solutions. We saw it before with things such as the EICRs, whereby because of it, you couldn't actually get an electrician to go, albeit you could, but the prices were escalated. So I know Luke mentioned 6 to 8, but what we could find is that price being artificially raised because of supply and demand issues. So they're actually looking at currently under the consultation, which was open until February of this year, that they're going to look at it either under the fabric performance method or under the smart readiness metric. But they're now looking at raising the 3,000, which was under proposal, to 10, to now a potentially £15,000 limit for a landlord. And the reason for that inertia is they did state that no previous works will be allowed into the calculation of spend from when the determination is made by DESNZ. So therefore, if you've done £4,000 or £5,000 worth of works prior to being told this is now the legislation, you'll be expected to do another 15 before you would then be eligible to get a 10-year exemption. Now, that 10-year exemption is currently valid in England. We've had no confirmation of that in Scotland yet. So they have put out that, a third of the stock in Scotland is either tenement or flats, and more than a third are actually pre-1919. So they understand they may need some exemptions, but we've had no guidance on this. And certainly for our industry, it we find that if there is no information, then there is nothing being done. And everything that I have had over my countless years of dealing with finance is risk managers like uncertainty even less. So where you're looking at your policies and your finance opportunities and what you can put to landlords, all of this uncertainty just means that it makes it more difficult for us to actually get on and do what needs to be done, which is make these homes more energy efficient and help people not only in making the homes better, but actually taking them out of the fuel poverty. We've had another announcement today that caps are going up. It's a small number. It's only 0.2% that they're going up today. But the prediction from economists was that that was going to go down by 1%. So we're already seeing that other pressures, other cost factors are bringing in. So I don't think the view of our sector and energy is going to get any less. But while ever this uncertainty, it makes it more difficult. So if we go on to the next one, and let's see how they play out. So we did our own analysis because we looked at the ONS analysis that had been done on the potential cost of change, and they'd looked at 2,000 EPCs. We felt that for England, that was too small a user base to be able to extrapolate up to the millions of properties, as Luke mentioned, that could get caught by this legislation. So we did it and we managed to look at 52,000 agency managed PRS. And as I said, agency managed slightly above the average. So we may need to look at this. 51.5% were below an EPC. That is what we're looking at, the scale of what we're wanting to get ready by currently within England a 2030 date. 2033 for all tenancies currently is what the proposal under consultation for Scotland. And if we took the ONS figures and those 6 to 8, the cost of upgrading the EPC, that's a £24 billion price tag sitting on the PRS alone, forgetting whether we bring social housing or whether short lets are bought into that. So 17.4% actually have a rating of E, F, and G. And that could possibly, if we're looking at yields and returns or financing options, it could make it potentially uneconomical for people to upgrade that looking at rent prices or yields without some kind of finance assistance. And we don't know what that looks like yet. If those landlords sold, that would mean 880,000 households that would be leaving the private rented sector. Think what that would mean to finance books, to risk metrics, to how we deal with it. We've also, if you look at this report, we've also managed to identify that while I agree EPCC is a good metric to go into, we currently have more properties in the private rented sector, quite large numbers, than we have exemption certificates at the F and G ratings. So it's great that we're going to move it up to a C. I think the problem you also have from the landlords and the estate agent with the market is without current MEES enforcement to the E level that we're currently experiencing, what is going to change when they move this up to a C? Are we just going to end up with more non-exempt properties? And for you as lenders, what does that mean to your risk? If the government is not enforcing the standard, what are you going to have as your policies to actually deal with this? We looked at somebody to give an example. I met with an MP last week who wondered if we could bring this down to a local authority level that he was involved in, and we did. What we actually saw was retrofits were averaging in his borough at close to 200 a year, private rented sector properties, that the reason for the new EPC was because they were actually upgrading the property. So far for the year FY25, that same borough has had 35. That shows you the scale of what we've seen in this inertia and slowdown. And so that's why I think everybody is looking to every sector to see how can you help? How can you show me the enforcement? How you can show me that me being a good landlord and doing what is asked is actually going to be recognised. And finance has a way to play that. Green initiatives, and I'm sure Chloe's going to come on and talk to this as to what we're able to do. But these will actually show landlords that if the government is not going to enforce those landlords, then actually I can be rewarded by my lenders, my insurers, the people who I'm actually going can recognize that I'm doing the right things with my property. And I think that's really where the finance sector can help and actually get rid of a lot of this uncertainty and worry that's coming from a lot of the aging landlord market as to, and the newer people coming in, how do we actually make this work to our advantage? And I think that is an opportunity that we shouldn't miss.
Brilliant. Thanks, Neil. Bobby, would you like to now share your slides, please?
Wonderful. So good morning, everyone. As Luke said, I'm Robert from Renewable. I'm the Renewable Sales Manager at Eco Approach. I spend a lot of my days helping landlords find smart, practical ways to future-proof their assets. With the new EPC standard on the horizon, we know there's a lot of pressure to invest, but this isn't just about regulation. I think it's important to note that it coincides well with our core mission at Eco Approach, which is making homes warmer, healthier, and more affordable to run. The key question, I think, for the entire sector isn't just what measures are needed, but how to choose the most effective combination for each unique property. And I don't have to ask you, Luke, because I can do this slide changing myself. To reach EPC-C, landlords must upgrade across several categories. I view these upgrade measures as a toolkit we have to work with. So we have insulation, which is the traditional backbone, also known as fabric. It includes major work like room and roof insulation, external wall insulation, and even smaller measures like adding cylinder jackets. We have systems and controls, which are viewed as efficiency drivers. So smarter heating with TRVs and better thermostats, or even upgrading to high heat retention storage heaters. We have renewables. These are quite high impact options, and it's primarily solar PV, and they contribute significantly to the EPC score and very visibly reduce tenants' bills. And of course, you have all the rest of the measures, very simple measures like LED lighting, which can get you vital final points to get you over that C threshold. And they're quite easy to do. So the necessary work, as you can see, it spans quite high cost, high impact, high disruption options like wall insulation, all the way to low cost, low disruption fixes like controls and LED lighting. So there's a huge amount of things that we can do to properties to retrofit them and make them compliant. This brings us to the key strategic challenge. It's working out the optimal mix of measures required to provide the best route to C. Every property starts from a different point, so solutions aren't one size fits all. It's a data-driven choice that balances three key factors. We have the EPC point impact, which measures gives the biggest point gain per pound spent, the capital cost and finance, how can the landlord minimise their outlay and secure favourable green finance, and disruption risk, which combination avoids lengthy void periods or tenant disputes. For example, choosing solar PV and TRVs for a quick 15-point gain might be strategically superior to tackling disruptive solid wall insulation first. So what I've gone on to do is I've highlighted some typical retrofit pathways here. We commonly encounter these for ground and mid-level flats, and one thing of note is really differences in age. A lot of the pathways that we use are dictated by wall construction. So we move from external wall insulation for older solid wall properties to much easier insulation of cavity wall insulation for post-1950s stock. I'm looking at flats here, ground mid-floor flats, where sort of solar PV isn't really an option. When we start to look at post-2000s flats, the focus shifts to system optimization as the building's fabric is generally sound. So we're looking at TRVs, double glazing, loft insulation, programmers, that sort of thing. To highlight the difference, for terrace houses, we also follow a fabric first approach for older stock, but transition to full system decarbonisation for modern properties. So post-2000, recommendations move away from fabric interventions, and we focus almost exclusively on advanced technologies like air source heat pumps and solar PV. Of course, homes are typically never typical, and this really looks very different in practice. As I said at the start, making these upgrades really shouldn't just be about meeting compliance, and I believe it's a missed opportunity to view them entirely through this lens. They're also about making homes more affordable and comfortable for tenants, and crucially, increasing asset values. So you can see here how measures like loft insulation and cavity wall insulation offer exceptionally fast returns. Loft insulation, for instance, you can save a detached house up to £390 annually. It has a typical install cost of around £1,100 and a lifespan of 40 years. So the ROI on this is quickly realised and it's very low risk. But the value is broader. So these guaranteed savings, even the simple ones like modern heating controls and switching to LED lighting, are immediately passed on to the tenant. And we know when tenants face lower energy bills, property becomes highly desirable and de-risked. By investing in efficiency, you are directly increasing your property's valuation, future-proofing it against any stricter measures that might be enforced, and ensuring continuous tenant demand. So obviously for lenders, brokers and agents, this strategic challenge and all the challenges we're experiencing is a massive opportunity. So we need financial products that are flexible enough to support this nuanced decision making. Lenders need confidence that the capital they provide funds the optimal package that unlocks the maximum efficiency for the specific asset rather than just funding compliance. This means that we all need to rely on the EPC reports as the initial blueprint, but we need to couple it with expert advice to model the various scenarios of retrofit measures. This ensures that any capital provided for a green mortgage or a specialised loan is truly an effective investment and not just a compliance cost. So to sum this all up, the pathway to EPC, it's not fixed. It's a complex strategic puzzle defined by the optimal mix of measures. We need to move beyond single measure thinking, embrace a holistic data-driven approach that balances cost, impact, and disruption. But that is me. So I will hand over to Chloe to discuss how financial innovation is stepping up and how we can make this transition viable.
Thanks, Bobby. Chloe, would you like me to share my screen? Go ahead.
I'm already sharing mine just so I can click through. So yeah, thank you very much. Both really interesting deep dives into the EPC landscape. So I'm going to address the financing side and what is out there, because I think actually there's not always a lot of awareness as to what financing solutions are available, particularly in terms of discounts for retrofitted and greener homes. Very quickly, for anybody who doesn't know, the Green Finance Institute is a non-profit organisation. We were founded in 2019 as part of the government's Green Finance Task Force. And our role is to work closely with the market to blueprint, test, implement and scale financial solutions to the climate crisis. And we're really trying to target real economy outcomes, so actually helping people to decarbonise their homes and not just improving the green credentials of the finance itself. And what I wanted to start with, because the questions will get into more deeper implications for the buy-to-let market, I wanted to just start with an overview of the green mortgage landscape. So as mentioned, I'm the Green Mortgage Campaign Lead, and I work within a team whose mission is to ensure that every household has access to a financing solution to help them make the transition and make their home more resilient and future-proof. So without further ado, I'll get into what does the green mortgage market look like? What is the lay of the land? Oh, and there is a bit of a hygiene note at the beginning. So actually, there isn't currently a formal regulatory definition of a green mortgage, which does make it difficult for us to quantify the amount of green mortgage kind of capital that's being mobilised currently, because we just don't have the data. But we have got some broad definitions that most products do actually fall into. And again, usual thing of any specific product that I mention, it's not an endorsement or recommendation to invest, etc., etc. So this is an overview of what the market looks like. And as you can see, green mortgages fall broadly into two buckets. So we have sustainable finance, or finance for existing greener homes. So you already meet A, B, and in the buy-to-let sector, actually a C is common to see as well. You meet that EPC standard and you can get a discount on the headline rate of your mortgage, or other things like cashback, rewards, and in the mainstream residential market, enhanced borrowing. So actually additional borrowing capacity to be able to purchase that more sustainable property. So the security property is green at origination, and these products are really designed to influence purchasing decisions and reward people who at refinancing stage have made some significant improvements to the property. I think the real implication for this, because the vast majority of green mortgages on the market today are underpinned by energy performance certificates and benchmarked to them, if you have improved your property, it really pays to get that post EPC in place. You will have to do it anyway for your MEES compliance, but many people miss that step and then they miss out on the access to these wider financing opportunities. So as I said, the main one that most people think of is probably the rate discount. For example, the NatWest Green Mortgage, where you get a reduction in the headline rates. In the mainstream residential market, you have enhanced borrowing, where basically it is assumed that if you have a new build or a highly efficient property, your energy bill is going to be lower. So when the lender's doing those affordability calculations to determine how much you have left over at the end of the month to service the mortgage, they can factor in those bill savings and lever that up into a higher borrowing amount. So helping to boost sort of the green premium in the market, because if you're putting more money in people's pockets to bid for greener homes, you're going to eventually have an impact on valuations. And also just generally helping to reflect in lenders' kind of risk and credit risk models the actual underlying value of the asset and how kind of secure and well that loan is likely to perform. There is a correlation between greener homes as well and loan performance, so it's in lenders' interests to start factoring this stuff in. The reason we don't see it so much in the buy-to-let sector is just because of the rules around interest coverage ratios make it a little bit more difficult to play with the affordability calculations, but there may be space here for further lender innovation. And then lastly, there's cashback solutions. So as I said, this may be a return of fees or a chunk of money that recognises that you've got a more sustainable property. Now, the second bucket, transition finance, I think is really interesting and more relevant probably for the challenge that faces many landlords today, because this is directly providing additional borrowing or cashback or discounts that reflect retrofitting, so that rewards you for having carried out a certain set of works or that actually make carrying out those works possible. So again, in the mainstream resi side, we've got the Virgin Money Retrofit Boost mortgage. It's probably the most kind of generous offer on the market, where with up to £10,000 available in cashback in order to complete retrofitting works. And this is really, yes, you'll have to fix for a longer period and accept a higher rate, but it's something that can be appealing to those who don't want an impact on their housing equity and to take on additional borrowing. Again, I'm calling on lenders to kind of do more of this stuff, because there's less innovation around this in the buy-to-let market, but certainly there are a lot of additional borrowing solutions as well. So alongside cashback, additional borrowing is where you can take out a further advance during the term of your mortgage or at the point of refinancing. And there are many offers now from building societies directly targeted at landlords for those green home improvements. So before you take out a costly loan with a high interest rate, it's really worth being aware of what's out there on the market. And of course, rate discounts. What these look like on the transition side is where you complete the works and then the rate drops once you confirm that they've been carried out. Again, less relevant for buy-to-let, but something that's worth bearing in mind in the wider green finance landscape. And so I think overall there are 93 green mortgage products propositions out there, and about a third of those are targeted specifically at buy-to-let. The GFI on this early December is due to launch its new and improved Green Mortgages Hub, which will detail all of these products propositions. So if you want to check that out, that's 2nd of December 2025. That should be going live then, but maybe watch this space. So I think one last thing I do want to mention is that there are also, to go alongside the process, it's not just about the financing, it's about the journey as well, and pairing that with a suitable retrofit solution. There are ancillary products and services and information hubs directly available via lenders now. So there are 51 different of solutions on the market today that we've managed to identify. Again, these are going to go live in our new and improved hubs, but broadly these fall into the categories of discounts on partnership products. So there might be a solar panels discount or a heat pump discount, whole home energy surveys, information and guidance hubs. And when you start to compare these services with things like lender cashback and even government grants as well, because there are, I think the boiler upgrade scheme and also GBIS are open to the private rented sector. And that's, 7,500 for the boiler upgrade scheme to switch away from gas heating to a low carbon solution like air source heat pump. When you kind of combine all of these different offers that are out there, you can start to get a better overall amount that you're paying. So it's not just about finding that one solution, that one green mortgage that's going to cover everything, but there may be a bit of a mix and match going on here. Bearing in mind as well, there are many unsecured offerings on the market as well, point of sale finance. So it's just really, really important, I think, to be aware of what's out there and really consult a broker, because brokers are the ones who are in that more whole of the market position and able to give you and signpost you in the right direction. So that's a whistle-stop tour of the green mortgage market. I can talk more in depth about buy-to-let in the Q&A. I fear I may have gone over a little bit. Luke's going to cut me off now, but that's broadly the lay of the land in the market. And yeah, happy to take questions and hand back over to Luke.
Brilliant. Thanks, Chloe and Neil and Bobby. And as you said, yeah, we're coming on to the Q&A now. But I think the first one is for you, Neil, actually. So how do you think these upcoming changes could actually reshape agent and landlord relationships and also the services that those agents provide?
Well, I think it's becoming more apparent that as more legislation and more things get piled on, that the idea that a landlord can meet this and be continually compliant while doing this as part of their day job has rapidly been disappearing over the last decade. Just like in a lot of instances where, Chloe is saying there, if you want finance assistance, then you go to a broker. You go somebody that has all this information. And I think what these changes are doing is they are moving that landlord market, not in a bad way, but into needing to have professional assistance in the same way they would within finance, in the same way they would with legal assistance, in keeping that property compliant. It's never been needed more that you've got somebody looking at it. I think the fact that we've had recent legislation which has increased the fines that can be levied in this, that they're looking at things such as the Decent Home Standards and AWAB's law, which has had particularly bad press within the social sector, as that comes over into the private rented sector. I think the need to be on top of these, and not just to be meeting it and ticking a box, but to be showing you are doing the right things. I mean, I'm a great advocate that we should be changing the terminology. I don't like landlords, lord of the land. It's very archaic. Then in actual, what you are now, if you get into this, if you take a buy-to-let financing, you are becoming a housing provider. And as such, you need to be making sure that all the laws, the legislations, and future-proofing that asset for what you're planning on using it for is part of your consideration. I still go to people now and ask them how much they have in their budget to maintain this asset over the course of the upcoming 12 and 24 months and get met with blank stares. This asset doesn't keep itself going. These retrofits are part of your commitment in putting your asset into being a housing provider. And I think that's what we're going to see change. I think that is starting to wake up. And I think that's why the news in the press will say people are leaving. I think they are, but they've realised their asset to the work they were willing to put in. There will always be new people willing to come in, taking these finance deals that we just saw on the screen and wanting to enter. But the people entering now will be entering with that new way of working as their norm. And I think that's what we need if we're going to move out of this oldie stock in Europe, all these problems, damp and mold, people unwell. We've got to make that change.
Yeah, completely agree with you there, Neil. And actually sort of tying into that, but on the sort of lender broker side, Chloe, how do you see the relationship evolving between lenders, brokers and landlords in delivering these upgrades?
So I think the relationship is going to have to become increasingly coordinated and tight-knit, because this is something that landlords, I mean, we've already talked about the different regulations they face. MEES is just one of them. And there is this barrage of regulatory initiatives that they're having to comply with and get up to speed with. So trusted advice from institutions that, yes, it may not be strictly within a finance provider's remit to point to all of these things, but I think being that signposting, person and point of contact is really essential. I think as well is important to bear in mind, this is in lenders' interests. From a portfolio risk point of view, EPC compliance is a credit risk factor. So, they don't want to have non-compliant assets that lose value or become unlettable. So they are motivated to innovate further around this. And I think probably what needs to happen is for product innovation to reflect the needs of landlords and concerns on the ground. For example, I was in a focus group quite recently looking at what landlords' needs are around financing home energy improvements. And we put to them sort of, what are your top concerns? Is it, knowing that the green upgrades are going to have a valuation uplift and future-proof the asset value of the property, or knowing that you might be able to command higher rents if the home is retrofitted to higher standards? And the number one concern of landlords was attracting and retaining good tenants. And I think what there isn't enough consideration of is what happens if you have sitting tenants. You have this incredibly tight deadline for turning around the property and making these upgrades, but that's going to be disruptive to whoever is currently living there. So I suppose my first ask of the market would be that we develop more products with void periods in mind. One solution that comes to mind is refurb to let, where it's kind of a bridging solution paired with a buy to let exit. So that, and also with the options to roll up the interest and have that kind of breather from paying interest during that initial bridge period. I think that's the type of solution that's going to, really reflects how what landlords' needs actually are on the ground. And similarly, I think, more innovation around enhanced borrowing, enhanced cashback amounts for retrofitting. But I think it really, really starts with education. So we, for example, at the GFI run a Green Mortgages training certificate aimed at brokers and also just general mortgage professionals working in lenders, for example, to really upskill them to be able to talk to clients about this stuff. And I think buy-to-let brokers are a little bit more used to stepping outside of their usual remit. I know, like when all of the tax changes came in, yes, a broker isn't an accountant, but they still kind of had to point them in the right direction as to what was coming down the track. And I think green isn't really any different here. But we need to upskill the professionals in order for them to educate their end clients. So training and education, I think, is really, really key.
I agree there, Chloe. I think, and I don't think necessarily green mortgage products as well need to necessarily give huge discounts and cashbacks. I think there's a lot of like flexible criteria and different ways of innovation as well that lenders could potentially take. But Bobby, I've got a really interesting question for you actually. Are landlords just going to go with the cheapest improvements like tick box exercise, or will they potentially do more work which has a better ROI and it might cost more, but it's actually future-proofing their property? I think it's quite interesting because we did an analysis on the previous proposals and we found if it was just a box ticking exercise, there'd be a net cost of the economy of about 5 billion. But if landlords were like supported and encouraged to do like the best ROI and like future-proof, it could be actually a net gain of the economy of about 5 billion. So, that's what we're sort of looking at. What's your opinion on that?
So again, I think mirroring what Chloe was saying there, I think education is really important here. If we treat this just as compliance, it's going to be a disaster in the future. Assets are going to be devalued more quickly, and you're not going to get the the ROI out of the measures that you're putting in. I think probably the best thing to look at and the best thing to talk to landlords and anyone that's thinking of retrofitting their property is going to be, if you're doing this just for achieving a C, then yes, they're going to look for the cheapest methods and the cheapest way of doing so. If you're doing this to achieve that C, but also to improve the price of your asset, to future proof, which is the better way to go, then you're going to be looking at more than the C. You're going to be doing what you can now. As with all of these, everything is going to be, any sort of energy improvement that you make, any sort of retrofitting that you do, is going to be paying dividends, and there's going to be an ROI there. There's nothing, even with sort of fabric, even with putting in LEDs, there's a cost to that, and you will save money in the future. So it's important, I think, to look at these things as investments rather than just pure capital costs, and to act in that way. I think there'll be a mix, but I think the pressure is on us to make sure that people have the education that these aren't just things that you have to do for compliance. They're actually beneficial in the long run, and it's better to do them now while we have some capacity to do them than in the future when you've run the risk of prices being marked up, you not being able to do this in time, and everything kind of pushes it, sort of bulges at the seams with our delivery. So it's an interesting question, but I think it depends primarily on the landlord.
I think that's an interesting point there, is education, because it depends where you are as a landlord. If you're like a new entrant, you might be thinking, well, what's the next regulation coming in 10 years? I want to be holding this asset for quite a while. Are they going to want to upgrade the heating? Shall I just do it now and get out of the way and it's future proofed? But if you're like, maybe well into retirement and it's just a bit of retirement income, you're not sure how long you're going to be having it for. You might just not care and just like literally tip, right, let's get me to a C. Yeah. So, but if you are that maybe younger or like looking to hold that asset for longer, it's about getting that education across of like, you can do this now and it's actually cheaper over the longer run, rather than in terms of future proofing, rather than just in the tip box exercise. No, sorry, you had a comment there.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you actually look at the EPCs that are being done because of upgrading, it is showing that it is being done largely to get to a C. The amount doing it above that are doing and getting it up to a B, is really not there, but up to a B, it's not falling through. It's such a small percentage because they're not being asked to do it, or the communication from the government is not to increase your asset. It is not to future proof or to look at it from financing. The government requirement is to get it to C so that you can continue to let to a tenant. Yeah. That is what they are actually performing and going through. So if nobody's educating them on what can be done, the other thing they've got on the other side, which is, I get Chloe is absolutely right with the changes with the Renters' Rights Act, everything is around having a good tenant. The other thing they've got sat there at the back of their mind is there were people that were told 10, 15 years ago to do spray insulation that are now finding that they cannot be financed. Yeah. There are people in Scotland who were told that one of the HEM measures that were being put in was to put in underfloor heating, and now they've got people coming out saying that this has its health problems, having large underfloor heating through properties. So they're almost, what do I do? I think there are always going to be people who will game the system, who will go and put one solar panel on with a battery intake that will say, I've now put solar on it and can do it. There will be people who put the panels on, don't look at where it's facing, and decide to use the percentage of roof metric to be able to do as the calculation to just get by it.
Yeah.
But they're small. When we're actually seeing people doing this, the majority of landlords out there are wanting, yes, I have to meet a C, but I want to do this in the most beneficial way for my property, and as Chloe did highlight, for the future earnings. We're not seeing that yet. We're not seeing a huge disparity between somebody who's in a B or a C versus somebody who's in an E or an F, because we've got too much a housing crisis. A tenant doesn't have the luxury of saying, "Do you know what, I'm not going to take this property because it's an E. I'm looking for a C." We've not got that luxury. But there was a question that came up in the Q&A, and it does talk to this, that where do we see this going? Will the retrofits, we cannot not expect 24 billion being put into the private rented sector to do all of these initiatives and it not have an upward pressure effect on rental prices. But that is going to happen, and it's not a double-edged sword, because you can't say, because of supply and demand, because of the needs, that we're not going to address our current aging properties and their energy efficiency, or we're not going to look at fuel poverty situations that we're actually putting people into because we're worried about upward pressures. I think they are two things that we shouldn't link together. There's a need to upgrade properties. There's a need from an energy point of view and our consumption for us to address that by making our properties more energy efficient. The secondary effect of what that may have to the asset and rental yields is something that the government will need to look at. It's not for the retrofit industry, I think, to worry about that.
Yeah, and I do think, there could be some sort of mechanism to say, how much can you put your rents up by in order to recoup this? Like, landlord's going to gouge
you
it.
mean rent controls? That's completely out, Luke. And to be honest, rent controls from a finance and from a lender's point of view would be catastrophic on where they could go, innovative wise, to try and assist with this.
And that's a good
So
point.
that's why the government has really held away. They've been very firm on a no to rent controls, because they see that what would do to stifle how the rest of the industry assists when they've got no coffers to put money forward. They need other initiatives to help, and that would be the shortest way to shut finance down if you limit the potential return from that asset.
That's a really good point. We have sort of run out of time. Chloe, have you got any more comments or sort of any input on what we just said?
Yeah, I guess just to tag on to that, I'd completely agree. And I also think this is why, to reiterate our point about education, the reason for doing this, rather than just tick box compliance, is to actually benefit tenants. Because if you retrofit to the level where the bills authentically go down, and we've seen examples of properties in this country today, in rainy, cloudy England, where you think solar panels don't work that well, but there are examples of zero bills properties, or properties producing a surplus. And I think if a higher rent is advertised, but alongside this property either has zero bills or very low bills, that's not actually adding pressure on the tenant, that's benefiting the tenant, and it's allowing the landlord to reap some of that benefit as well, because we know that the split incentive problem for retrofitting is a really big barrier for landlords, that they invest all this capital in their property and then they don't actually see the day-to-day returns. So I think and more communication around this, more data on valuation uplift, so that this is done properly and not just as something to get to a minimum of C and then forget about it, because I think it has real benefits for tenants, for landlords, for everybody.
And I think from, we're quite a major supplier of retrofit. We work with a number of lenders, estate, nationally. I think, contractors needed to have their own standards, like not using the percentage, like just put on a solar panels on a north facing roof and just doing a tick box exercise that way, or just put one solar panel on. Like, contractors need to be like, no, we're not doing that, sorry. Or have certain standards, because they will have more demand than there is supply, so they can potentially pick and choose what jobs they do. So it's about, this is a standard we're doing. If you don't want to do it, then there's plenty of other landlords we're going to be working with, sort of thing. So
I do think as well that sort of approach to retrofitting, that is a huge risk, because as we've changed to the EPC calculation methods to SAP 10, we're looking at the home energy model coming in. If there is a big uptick in people gaming this system, that's going to be fixed, and you'd hope that there's going to be no advantage there. So I'd stay away from any of that behaviour. If that's a big thing that people are doing, it's not going to last very long.
Yeah.
I wholly agree with that, and I think the home energy model is something probably landlords should be aware of, in that it is a big move in the goalpost coming down the track on what actually constitutes an A or B property. So many properties that are A or B today would probably be downgraded to C or below under the home energy model, because it is so much more focused on real-time building performance and a more accurate more up-to-date set of measures. So I think this is something that could really impact your decision on whether to act now or later. I know a lot of people are sitting on their hands because they're thinking, oh, maybe I could get exempt, and I don't want to invest anything that doesn't meet that kind of minimum capital spend. But there is a reason to just act now, because you can secure your certificates now, right before the goalposts really shift, and you've got a much higher bar to meet to get to that C.
And if you're a C and then you slip into a D, then brilliant. Thank you very much, everyone. I think that's been a really great discussion, and maybe you've just picked up a topic for our next webinar, Chloe. Maybe the home energy model. We can go into detail on that. But brilliant. Again, thank you to the panel. Really appreciate it. We will be following this up with posting a blog and social media posts and the video on this as well. So you can share it with your colleagues. So thank you again. Have a good day and enjoy the weather. It's cool, but I'm generating a lot on my solar panels, so that's got me in a good mood. Brilliant. Thanks, guys. Take care.
Thanks,
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Cheers. Bye.
Cheers.